Hey, it's Jeff Zito. Thanks for checking out the Celebrity Jobber podcast, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating. And if you could, please leave a review. New episodes drop every Friday, and Wednesdays are Celebrity Jobber Rewinds. This one goes way back. It's episode number 29. I'm sure a lot of people didn't hear this particular episode. It was a pretty fascinating discussion with the lead guitarist of Aerosmith, Joe Perry. We talk about what he thought he would be if he wasn't a rock star, like what really interested him in life. And I think you're going to find it to be very fascinating stuff. We also talk about how he first met Steven Tyler. So here we go, Celebrity Jobber Rewind, episode number 29, Aerosmith guitarist Joe Perry.
The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Oh man, I am so excited for this episode. You know, I like talking to all people, all celebrities. I love finding out, you know, what makes them tick, obviously what their first job was and what they might be doing, you know, if they weren't famous. Because, you know, it's interesting. You know, you're like one big break away from becoming just an ordinary Joe, you know, if you didn't have that big break. I mean, what would have become of Joe Perry? You know, here's a guy that is a legend, an icon in the band Aerosmith, and then also has a couple other side projects like the Joe Perry Project, which he's had for quite some time. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And the Hollywood Vampires, which is that band he has with Johnny Depp and Alice Cooper, and they constantly tour. So, I mean, look, the guy is in one of the biggest rock bands of all time and still has like side projects and does other band stuff and tours. So he stays extremely busy. Our guest today on Celebrity Jobber, lead guitarist of the band Aerosmith, the legendary Joe Perry. How's it going, man?
It's going good.
I'm here in the Tampa Bay area. So is the word on the streets correct about you spending some time in Longboat Key?
Spending time there. I live there.
You live there full time?
I live like about a quarter of a mile from Brian Johnson.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that little part of Florida is kind of anyway, it's great there.
Cool, man. How long have you been here for?
I think going on 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Off and on. You know, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I've had a farm up in Vermont, and I've lived in Boston, so just outside of Boston. So we've been spending most of our time in Florida. It's unusual because of the whole COVID thing. Kind of stay in one place for a while,
right?
Which was new for us. You know, I never could conceive of actually making a living and sleeping in your own bed more than a month at a time. You know.
Right. Well, tell me, you know, I hear you are a fan of the water. Is that correct? I read somewhere that you were trying to become a marine biologist or aspired to become a marine biologist early in life. Is that true? Yeah,
I was born to be in the water. There's no doubt. I mean, I look back and it's there's a magnet pulling me that way. So I need to be close by, and my wife Billy is the same. She needs to at least see it, live by it, live near it. You know, we love traveling the world and seeing all the different places, but we need to be near the water. And more important, I like to be in it.
Right.
The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito. The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito.
Tell me a little bit about growing up in Massachusetts. Were you near the water there? But tell me a little bit about growing up.
Well, our family lived in a town called Hopedale, right outside of Boston, which is actually, probably like a half an hour away from where the Patriots play. You know? I mean, everybody knows where that is, but I spent most of my time in New Hampshire on a lake, and that's where I met Steven, that's where I met Tom, and that's really where my roots are, you know. And so I spent all my time in the water there, man. I wrote all about it in the book.
Tell me a little bit about mom and dad and growing up in outside of Boston. I know your mom was in a school system. Your dad was an accountant. Did you guys you have any siblings? Did you grow up? How did you grow up? Middle class, upper class?
Middle class, very middle class. And it's a really small town. And my sister, I was just with her a few days ago. She still lives up in New Hampshire, and we grew up in a very, very like almost Norman Rockwell kind of town, you know.
Right.
It took me to getting out of the town and just getting out to see the rest of the world, you know. And it was a really, really kind of normal childhood as far as that goes, you know. I mean, I was really fortunate to have that. And but you know, once I got out in the world and realized that maybe being a doctor, lawyer, tailor, sailor, whatever, wasn't in the cards for me.
Right. Do you remember your first job? What did you do as a very first job, paying job?
I probably, besides mowing the lawn for my parents, I worked in a factory. In the town that I grew up in, it was a little factory town, and I worked with like down in a foundry where they actually, you know, they pour like molten metal, and back when factories actually made everything from the ground up, you know.
Wow.
Woodwork, metal, you know, molding parts. I mean, it was really a dirty job, but you know, I learned about what I didn't want to do.
You were talking about growing up, you know, on that lake up in New England in Massachusetts, and you said that's where you met Steven Tyler. Can you tell me a little bit about that meeting?
In New Hampshire, yeah. We used to play, his band from New York used to come up and play, and they were like a couple of years ahead, and his band was arguably the best live band that I can remember seeing, aside from the bands that, you know, I used to see in Boston, like The Who or the Jeff Beck Group. But they were a great band, and I remember finally we had a chance to jam together and decided that I had something he didn't have, and he had something I didn't have, and that was the thing that put it together when we moved to Boston. You know, we figured it would be it was the nearest big city, and you know, it's a college town, and it was a great place to try and start what we wanted to do. You know, plenty of rock and roll clubs at that time, and so it was. So that's what happened. You know, we found each other out in the woods. And I was friends with Tom. He was my best friend at the time, and he still is. And you know, then we moved to Boston.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
You ever think about, like, if it was a series of events or a certain event, like what your big break was? You're jamming with these guys. You're in Aerosmith, but what was like what you consider your big break?
It was a series of little breaks, I have to say. I mean, there were times when you felt like we, you know, got to the next level. I think it was when maybe after the first album came out and the record label was ready to dump us, and we went out and we toured a bunch around, and we started to play outside of Boston, and we were making noise because it's the same advice I give kids now that ask me, what do you do? The only thing you can do is play great and write songs that excite your fans in the audience, you know, in a club or whatever. And that's kind of what happened. Every place we played, people walked away going, wow, you know, it would be singing our original songs. So that's it. And I remember that couple of dates in Boston after the Dream On single came out. People started to come to the gigs, and it wasn't just our friends and people that you ran into hanging around town,
Right.
And hand tickets out, I mean, it felt like there was something going on, and that was probably the time.
So, FYI, other than Aerosmith, Joe Perry has 2 other bands. The Joe Perry Project, which originally formed in the 70s and has been going on and off since then. By the way, the lead singer of the Joe Perry Project happens to be the great Gary Cherone from Extreme and one-time lead singer of Van Halen. Also, the Hollywood Vampires. You got Joe Perry playing guitar for the Hollywood Vampires, Johnny Depp, and lead singer Alice Cooper, who, by the way, Joe, I met a few years ago, and just so you know, he deemed me worthy. It's a real honor, man. Great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Good. Thanks a lot, man.
I mean, can you imagine growing up in a small town and seeing Joe Perry running around? Because kind of that's the way I'm feeling right now. I grew up in this little coastal town in Sarasota, Florida. During high school, that's where I lived. And, they used to call it God's waiting room because there was a lot of old people there. Joe Perry from Aerosmith must stick out like a sore thumb in Longboat Key. Let me tell you something about Joe Perry, though. I mean, the definition of cool. You know what I mean? He's 72 years old. He's got that little snarl like Elvis used to have. And I mean, some iconic guitar licks. Don't even let me, Back in the Saddle and Walk This Way. I don't want to start naming song by song, but I mean iconic. Okay, Aerosmith, iconic. Grew up in a middle-class neighborhood outside of Boston. He has a sister. His mother worked as a school gym teacher. His father was an accountant. Again, he said he had a good growing up. And a water baby. Again, kind of like myself. I feel like I need to be near the water or in the water to kind of be happy and clear my head. Same thing with Joe Perry. Now he lives in Florida, but, he's spent some time near the water up in Boston and Cape Cod and then at a big-ass lake in New Hampshire. And he tells us the story about how he met Steven Tyler, who would be his lead singer in his band and one of his best friends. And, I mean, these two guys, can I say anything more about the band Aerosmith? Absolutely iconic and unbelievable. His first job in a factory, and he said it was somewhat of a dirty job, but what I found interesting was his love of the water and how he aspired to become a marine biologist. He did come out with a book a little bit ago. And in the book, talked about wanting to follow in the footsteps of his hero, who was Jacques Cousteau. And he wanted to become a marine biologist because he was so fascinated with the water. And I thought that was really interesting, he wrote in his book. But he wasn't good in school. He, later in life, diagnosed with ADHD, which, caused him problems in school. And wrote about it in his book, Rocks, My Life in and Out of Aerosmith. So I kind of thought that was interesting. Could you imagine Joe Perry, a marine biologist? Reminds me of the Seinfeld episode when George Costanza is lying about being a marine biologist, and then there's a beached whale, and it's like, oh my gosh, is there a marine biologist? And then, all of a sudden it's Joe Perry. Can you imagine if Joe Perry was a marine biologist? Well, I think he did a lot better for himself as a lead guitarist in the band Aerosmith. Awesome episode of Celebrity Jobber, which you can listen to simply by going to CelebrityJobber.com. I mean, we're on everything. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you pod. And please, if you like us, give a 5-star rating and leave a review. That'd be really cool. Man, I don't know how we could top this, but don't worry. We'll keep them coming. Another episode of Celebrity Jobber in the books. As always, I thank you for listening. I'm Jeff Zito. See you next time.